Please welcome to the stage, Michael Robinson, Vice President of North America Healthcare Sales at VMware. Anthony Wilson, Senior Director and Global Sales Leader of Azure VMware Solution at VMware. Erica Hudson, Director of HR Management Partners at VMware. Moderated by Hazel Barker, Colleague Support Engineer at VMware.
Good day, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. My name is Hazel Barker, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for the VMware-sponsored Prop 'em Up portion of the Mid-Level Manager Symposium. Your panelists today are three of VMware's most respected leaders, and today we will be discussing the 4 must-haves for leadership traits to inspire, uplift, and energize your people in a post-pandemic world. Getting us started this afternoon, we are going to have Mr. Anthony Wilson, who is a Senior Director and Global Leader of AVS Solutions. And Anthony will allow you to take it away and just give us some insight on where you came up with this topic of discussion.
Sure. Hey, thanks, Hazel, and thanks everybody out there in the virtual audience. It's such a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, joined by some great colleagues at VMware. So Prop 'em Up is actually a leadership workshop I created a few months into the pandemic, right, to take a look at how we would lead teams differently. The word prop is actually an acronym for positivity, resilience, optimism, and persistence, which are key traits that leaders have to have in order to get the best out of their folks in this post-pandemic world, right? So I get it that some of those words might sound like motherhood and apple pie, actually soul food to this audience, right? But there's plenty of academic and science-based research that's out there that talks about how these traits supercharge performance and improve results. Every year, there's different books that come out that promise to deliver answers to the secret for success in leadership, right? But recently, Yale, Michigan, Harvard researchers, they decided to examine the question empirically. They found that the greatest predictor of success for leaders is not their charisma, influence, or power. It's not personality or attractiveness or innovative genius. The one thing that supersedes all these factors is something they call positive relational energy. That's the energy exchange between people that helps uplift, enthuse, and renew them. And that's the foundation for what became Prop. Talk about more of that later on. But when we started to collaborate on this session, my colleagues, as experienced and talented as they are, they added some other key leadership qualities such as empathy and clarity. We blended our collective leadership experiences and best practices to share some concepts with you that we hope will help you inspire, uplift, and energize your people in today's new normal. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Thanks, Hazel.
My pleasure. And I think this day and age, we all need a little bit of inspiration, uplifting, and energy just instilled within us. And not only that, right, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. So I think that that's important as well, that we are making sure that we're filling ourselves so that way we can continue to pour into others. All right. And next, we will have Michael Robinson, who is our leader and VP of North America Healthcare Sales. And we're going to come to you today to talk a little bit about optimism. Michael, can you take us away?
Yeah, so actually my cup is full today. I am at a healthcare summit. It's focused on health equity, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But these are accomplished leaders within the industry that look like us and are true leaders and are leading the charge around eliminating health disparities. So I've been full. I've been here a day and a half and just really supercharged. But I'm going to start off with a quote. And I'm going to quote Winston Churchill because my topic is optimism. And Winston Churchill said something to the effect that pessimists find the challenge in every opportunity, and optimists find the opportunity in every challenge. So just think about that for a minute. You know, it's about the mindset. It's about how you approach problem solving. It's about how you approach leadership as well. And I shared with my colleagues earlier before we started that I just watched a panel of the 3 female surgeon generals, all whom happen to be women of color. And when I look at the challenges and struggles that they've had, the level of persistence and optimism that actually helped them drive innovation, disruption in the marketplace, and quite frankly, in the country, was amazing. And I did hear that common theme around believing that there is a better outcome that can be driven. Now, optimism is not, foolish pie in the sky kind of belief that all things are going to be rosy, but it is an approach that allows you to look at things holistically and determine, at what level do you need to engage. I agree with Anthony. It's about energy from a leadership perspective, and how do we bring that energy in a positive manner to impact our colleagues and teams. And so for me, as the senior citizen on this panel, and more than 4 decades of some challenging environments and working through those challenges and opportunities, the one thing that I felt was a common point of reflection was that I've always tried to find the outcome that would, bring the brightest outcome for us all. And so, I think if you looked at that collectively, and in most organizations where I've been a part of, I believe that you can lead from wherever you stand. But if you don't have that positive energy that you bring to an organization, you become a detractor from what we're trying to get accomplished. And so the most successful organizations I've been a part of, and part of my leadership philosophy, is to try and develop that, mindset that will allow the organization to drive forward, to think positively about what we're doing. We have a vision and a mission, and making sure that we're trying to address that. So I think it's an absolutely critical character trait, and it's one that you have to infuse inside your organizations to ensure that you build a sustainable, high growth, high performance organization. And so, I'll get off my soapbox, but again, the Surgeon General's just kind of put an exclamation point on the fact that they met some, huge challenges, and that their ability to be able to not only believe in themselves and have the belief in what they were trying to do from an outcome perspective, but also how do you infuse that into your organizations, and in their cases, the entire country.
I think that was very, very well said, especially the part about finding the opportunity and the challenge, right? I think that we get stuck in our comfort zones and there's no room for growth there. So when there are challenges, instead of, cowering to them, let's rise to them, because that's where the opportunities for growth come in. So thank you so much for that, Michael. And Anthony, we will take it over to you to talk about a little bit of persistence.
Yeah, I tell you can't get anything done without being persistent. We say often in sales that you'll hear 7 no's before you get to 1 yes. I remember that when I was dating too, right? I used to get no a lot of times before I got to a yes. So maybe that's where I learned some of that persistence from. But it actually all comes from my grandmother. And I had to reflect back on her, this woman who came here from Jamaica as a skilled seamstress in the late 60s, early 70s. And everybody on the island is like, what are you doing with all the racial turmoil that's going on there? But she persisted that she wanted to go create a better life for her and her family. And without her, there's no me today. And in 2017, I ran into a set of circumstances where I had been a frontline manager at VMware here for about 4.5 years. In fact, I was one of the first Black sales managers back in 2012 in the company, managing a sales team. And at the time, there was no Michael Robinson to look up to. So happy that he joined us several years ago as our VP and gave me some great mentorship and built some confidence. And he told me to go after what I wanted. And at that time, I was trying to get promoted to the next level of leadership. And I kept getting tapped on the shoulder by folks who say, you should apply for this role and you should apply for that role. And each time I made it to the final stage, it was myself and another candidate, but I didn't get selected, right? So I got brought to the dance, but I didn't get danced with. And I was discouraged. I had never been 0 for 5 for anything in my life. So it was a blow to the ego, a blow to the mental health. But I remember some words that my grandmother said that said, nothing that you ever want happens easy. And so you got to keep pushing and fighting. And what I did is I actually went to HR and I said, hey, listen, I've been tapped on the shoulder 5 times. I've been interviewed. I've been the only underrepresented minority candidate in the interview pool. So is this some type of Rooney Rule type thing going on? Am I being selected as the one token Black candidate here? And I made it clear that I wasn't interested in interviewing again for another role. I wanted my next role for somebody to come tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, this role is yours. And literally I just laid it on the table and said I was going to put my head down and keep doing my job. And about 3 weeks after that, I heard from a VP in another one of our organizations that said, hey, Anthony, you've been on the radar. We've got this role for you. It's a promotion. You're going to be managing this other part of our business. I said, so is this an interview process? It's like, no, this job is yours. You got first right of refusal. There's a couple meetings that I want you to have with some people that you get comfortable with. And that was it. And my grandmother passed in 2007. And when that happened to me, I just felt her looking down and smiling on me and saying, thank you for being persistent. Thanks for never giving up. And you have more going for you than you do against you. And so that's what I take in. I think that persistence is something that we as leaders have to demonstrate. That sometimes as leaders, we get hit with some things heavy and we cannot afford to have our shoulders droop or our head down, right? It's built in our DNA, especially us, especially you folks in the audience that look like us. It's in our DNA for centuries that we persist and we get to the top no matter what.
I couldn't. Very, very well said. I understand the power of having an amazing grandmother and the power of praying grandmother, right? And the benefits that come with that. So thank you for Granny for instilling what she did in you. We appreciate you. And then Erica, we're going to take it over to you, Erica Hudson, who is our Director of HR Management Partners. And we're going to discuss a little bit of empathy and clarity.
Absolutely. So my story is a little bit different. I joined VMware more recently than these gentlemen, but I joined under unusual circumstances. I joined during the pandemic. I succeeded a manager that was very amiable and beloved and used to also be co-located with his team. And that leader exited under questionable circumstances, and the team had a lot of loyalty for that past leader. At the same time, he was not holding the team accountable to the standards of the organization. So I came in with a different style from my predecessor and had the disadvantage of not physically meeting or working with the team. So setting expectations, being clear about where the team was succeeding and where they were falling short was really critical for energizing the team and getting them aligned to our North Star. After a few months of working together, many of them actually shared with me that as much as they loved their old manager, they never actually knew where they stood and really appreciated the constructive feedback that was helping them to grow as professionals. Now, in addition to clarity, it's also important to show empathy as a way to uplift your team. It's one of those traits that I think is best done by showing versus telling. So I'll share a story as an example. I've always told my team, you guys are professionals. I trust you to manage your time accordingly. And some of them believe that. Some of them, probably come with some baggage and just aren't comfortable with that. So I had a team member that shared with me that they were going to be out of pocket on Wednesdays after 4 p.m. for the next couple of months so that they could take their son to a church camp. And then she also shared the first week that they did it, it was a disaster. Her 3 kids and her were all stressed out and almost in tears by the time they got there. And I challenged her to think about, is shutting down at 4 o'clock actually sufficient? And what's the difference that it might make to the experience if you shut down at 3:30 instead? At the end of the day, the value that she would bring to her role at VMware for that extra 30 minutes versus the value she would bring to her household by taking some time and some pressure off of the system is kind of a no-brainer. And, if you think about it, the relationship that we have with our teams, it's a give and take. And when your team sees that you're willing to show genuine care for them, they're a lot more willing to give that discretionary effort when you really need it and when it really matters to the organization.
Yeah, people are going to be wondering if you're hiring, Erica, with that kind of work-life balance.
But see, the way that you went about that, Erica, I think that was perfect because that's what differentiates between a manager and a leader, right?
Yeah.
And as Michael said, you have to lead from where you stand. And so what you poured into this individual is definitely going to come back in the effort that they're going to put forward for you moving forward as a leader because they know that they have your support and have your back. And so in turn, they're going to make sure that you feel fully supported by anything that you come to them with. So thank you for that.
If I could just double click, I love empathy and I love your articulation of it, Erica. So the one thing I would say as leaders, one of the most difficult things that, we all have to do over our career is actually terminate or let someone go from an organization. And it's really where I learned a lesson around empathy, because at the end of the day, that's someone's livelihood. It impacts their family. It impacts, their career long term. And whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. You have to show up and show respect for the human being and make sure that you have. And I think, nobody loves to do that. Nobody I know anyway loves to do that. But again, over 4 decades of having to do that multiple times, I found, over time that my EQ for empathy has grown, because every person that I've walked out of an organization or let go from an organization, they leave a little bit of themselves with me. And so for me to be a true leader and to be, I think effective after us, whether it's one person or 100 people, you have to figure out, how you do that in a very empathetic way. And I think that, really helps people identify with their true servant leadership, and also, ingratiates leaders to their organization because they're being authentic as well. So I just wanted to double click on that point, Erica. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And very well said, both of you. And I thank you for that. And so next, we're going to get a little perspective on what it is that you individually do to inspire, uplift, and energize your teams and organizations. And Michael, we'll start with you.
Okay. I feel like I'm doing all the talking, so I'll be brief this time. But one of the things that I love about my role leading the healthcare vertical for VMware, and I did it for Microsoft prior to this, is that almost the entire organization to a person is mission driven. And so it makes my job a lot easier in terms of inspiring people. We all have stories around, our personal health or our family's health. And the fact that at the intersection of technology and healthcare, there's an opportunity to drive better outcomes, to be able to reduce the cost curve. As a nation, we spend nearly 20% of our GDP on healthcare. That's the highest of any developed country in the world, but it's also, we don't drive outcomes that are any better than a lot of those other countries in the world. And so what I love about it is that it's easy to apply the principles of motivation, inspiration for your team, to be able to make sure that people stay focused on that vision and that mission in terms of how do you drive that forward. Now, I've not always been in healthcare, so there are other things that I think factor into true leadership from a inspiration and a motivational perspective. And I think it starts with you being authentic, you being transparent, and making sure that your organization understands that that's who you are. Who shows up is who you are. The other point I would make is that you have to create a culture of accountability inside the organization, and I like to call it say do. And basically, you make sure that you do what you say and you articulate and you live by, I'm going back family too, Anthony. And, my dad always said, your word is your bond. That's not something that you break. If you make a commitment, you keep it. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And so I think that resonates with people, and people react to you being an authentic leader and also making sure that you are holding the organization accountable for doing what they say they're going to do as well. And so, again, I believe that cross leadership kind of mantra that says you lead from wherever you stand in the organization, and you empower people to be able to do that. And then you also have to stand and be authentic on your spot in the organization.
And one thing I can say, if I've never learned anything else from you, it is definitely being authentic and being unapologetic about who you are. So thank you for that life lesson, Michael.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. And Erica, we'll go to you. How are you inspiring, uplifting, and energizing?
Yeah. So this is an interesting circumstance that I'm in right now. And, I'm thinking about some of the things Michael and Anthony said about optimism and being authentic. It's a really strange time for us right now. We're in the midst of being acquired as an organization. And from day one, the purchaser made the comment of they're going to identify cost savings and eliminate duplications in areas such as HR, finance, and legal. HR right here. So, like, to me, they put our name on a slide. That was very uncomfortable. So trying to keep a team motivated in the midst of this type of ambiguity, it's really challenging. At the same time, it goes back to how do we stay optimistic? How do we stay aligned to our mission? And as an organization, our mission is about increasing the capabilities of our managers. So part of what we're doing is leveraging data and showing the data of like the great job that my team is doing and the impact that they're having when it comes to increasing manager capability and making sure we've got a strong data set to show that impact. My leadership is about to be going to the CEO of the purchaser later this month to talk about and try to sell the merits of this organization. At the same time, I've got to be transparent. I got to be empathetic. It's not complete pie in the sky and I know everything's going to be okay, because I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. So my conversations with the team is focused on preparing them for whatever it is they desire for tomorrow. And so part of that is, giving them the opportunities. This is a strange space we're in. And so it does kind of break down some of the barriers of what our job used to be, because we might get some new opportunities as we're preparing for this transition, as we've got some gaps in the organization. It gives them some space to play in spaces that they may not have been able to play before, but giving them the space to grow, to have new opportunities, to get feedback. So I'm setting them up to win today and make an impact today, and also to be prepared and more marketable for whatever their tomorrow holds.
And that is why they appreciate you as a leader and will continue doing the job until whatever day comes, because of everything that you're doing. So kudos to you. And I hope somebody took a note out there, because that right there is how you do it. All right. And Anthony, we'll take it now over to you. How are you inspiring and energizing and uplifting?
Yeah, so I'm a natural low energy person, as you can tell out there, right? So I always have to pick myself up a little bit. But in all seriousness, in addition to my day job at VMware, running some type of sales team, today I'm running our worldwide partnership with Microsoft for our public cloud offering. I've always had another role where I was doing some type of new hire sales training, walking our new hires through. So probably 2,000 something VMware employees over the past 4 or 5 years. And what I've always tried to do is think about myself in their shoes, right? So what would I want this presentation to look like? What would I want this meeting to look like, right? And so it's about, I like people that are energetic. Going back to the research that I talked about earlier from the Yale professors, right? Positive relational energy. One of the examples they give is, we all know that person who walks into a room and it's like rays of sunshine are coming from behind their head, right? That energy just exudes itself and brings other people into them. If you don't have that naturally, that's okay. It can become a learned behavior. You just have to be intentional about it. And there are little triggers that we can do all the different time. Today, we're having a lot of virtual meetings. One of the things I always do with my team, I have a little music playing in the background as everybody starts to log into the Zoom or the StreamYard or whatever platform that they're using, right? And I might have a little Stevie Wonder going on, a little Superstition or something that's gotten folks energized, because just that little bit of music changes that mentality that somebody might be coming into the room with. Both Hazel and I are members of the Black at VMware Pod, right? That's our employee resource group that acts as a safe space for Black employees at VMware, and also champions our efforts to improve our representation. When we have our leadership meetings, it's not dour, it's positive. There's a lot of energy in there. There's a lot of positive feedback. There's a lot of optimism about what can be done in spite of the budget cuts, in spite of the pending acquisition, right? So it's a mentality that you as a leader have to create. And again, as Michael said, you lead from where you are. You set the tone. So think about being energetic. Be intentional about what you can do to inspire and uplift people. And that empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, that makes it a little bit easier to exhibit those traits.
Listen, it sounds so cliche, but it's as simple as treating people how you want to be treated, right? And, a lot of things just boil down to the basics. So I thank you all for that. Do we have any time for Q&A? Do we have any Qs so we can give the A's? All right, so we're going to do two things right now. Touch on what we've already discussed, and then we're going to give some closing remarks because I know that we are pretty much at time. And so we've discussed propping people up, right, which stands for positivity, resilience, optimism, perseverance. We've also talked about empathy and clarity, right? Are there any other leadership qualities that you would suggest that we continue to work on and continue to grow and develop, not only for ourselves, but for those around us? And then I'll ask you all to give your final nugget of wisdom and encouragement to our audience today.
Yeah, so I'll start. Again, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I think transparency in an organization is important for building trust and also for setting expectations and accountabilities as you go forward. And so to the extent that people understand and can embrace that level of transparency in an organization, I think it's absolutely critical. And in organizations, I've led organizations large and small, and it becomes very personal in terms of making those connections and making sure that people feel like you are being transparent and authentic in your leadership, and in setting the direction for the organization, what you measure and what you expect in an organization as well. And so I know that's very operational kind of focus, but I think it helps build that level of trust in an organization that allows you to, in difficult times like Erica talked about, where there is ambiguity and there is uncertainty, that authenticity and transparency allows you to be a leader and say, candidly, I don't have the answer today, but I'm optimistic that we will work through this as an organization, and you have my commitment as a leader that I will let you know when the road turns left or right. And so as we go through this, and this has been front and center for us for the last few months, it's really important that we build that. And I challenge our management. We were just at a VP Leadership Summit a week or so ago, and I challenged the organization. I was like, we have to communicate more. We have to be, open. We have to share whatever is available to share because you have to give people context about, what their future potentially looks like. And you might not have all the answers, but again, I think people will respect the truth, and people will, we live in a society today where the truth gets challenged constantly. But I think, when you've established that level of trust and respect in the organization, people will appreciate the truth. And when you don't know, say you don't know. And again, that authenticity of leadership is really important. I believe as a leader, I get better as a leader when people reciprocate and are transparent about their concerns and challenges that they have in the organization. Because again, it positions me better to be better able to address some of those things and to identify trends in the organization that need to be addressed candidly. So again, for me, it's a huge part of leadership. And I think, the things that we're talking about today are kind of inextricably linked. You can't be authentic and you can't build trust without, being persistent and optimistic and, the other characteristics that we talked about. And so it's not that one thing that's gonna, make you a successful leader. It's really about how you manage through those different characteristics and show up as an authentic leader in your authentic self.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So Erica, we'll take it to you, and then we'll get into a little Q&A after Anthony.
Awesome. So there was a question that came in about how to be authentic while showing these leadership traits. And I think it starts with centering yourself. So, you think about what they say on the airline, put on your own mask before you try to help somebody else with theirs. So you've got to go back to, if you're trying to figure out where's the positivity here, how can I be optimistic, center yourself. and figure out, what's the good that can come in this situation. So to the quote that was shared earlier, like, where is the opportunity and how do you identify that opportunity for yourself so that you can get grounded in that optimism so that you can then bring that forward to your team.
I love that. And speaking of, because you highlighted on with the changes that we're going through right now, Erica, I'd like you to also answer, how do you lead an uplift during change saturation?
Mm. That's a good one. And I love that term, change saturation. There's so much going on. I mean, aside from us and the acquisition, there's just so much going on, and there's just the macro space out there. I love looking at, like, where are we in the change curve and understanding where each individual we're working with is, because you might be further along in that change curve and you might be at that point of acceptance and they might be still in the early stages. So understanding where they are in that stage and working with them, meeting them where they are. Somebody mentioned earlier the importance of treating others the way you want to be treated. And I have a little pivot to that of how to treat others the way they want to be treated, because everybody's different and you've got to flex your style to what that person's needs are to meet them where they are. I interviewed a young lady a couple years ago, and I noticed in the interview she kept asking, well, I'm curious about this and I'm curious about that, almost to the point that it got on my nerves of, like, how can I be more curious, be curious with my team to understand where they are in their heads, where they are in their thinking, because if I stay curious, that helps me to be open and know when I need to flex to where they are and what their needs are.
I love it. I love it. All right. So, Anthony, I got a couple of questions here for you, especially
Yes.
our prop master. So, we'll start with do you have any worksheets for prop? They are loving the acronym out here.
Yeah, so I'll get Bethany. I'll get you some stuff after this, but so a couple of these we can knock out really quick, actually using props. So to build on what Erica was saying, to lead and uplift during change saturation, there's a lot going on. That's where the R in prop comes from, resilience, right? So those who people often misquote the whole Darwin thing, thinking that those with the greatest ability to adapt are the ones that survive. That's not how the quote goes. The quote is about those who have the greatest ability to respond to a changing environment. Those are the ones that survive, right? And that resilience is what helps you respond to change, right? So build up that resilient skill set, right? Embrace change. Michael quoted Winston Churchill earlier, right? Is this challenge present an opportunity, or are we just going to look at it as just a challenge, right? So that's where the resilience factor in prop comes up to help you deal with a lot of change, because change is not going to stop, right? 2.5 years ago, we never thought the economy would shut down. I never thought that I'd be doing 90% of my work from a computer screen for 8 to 12 hours a day, right? But companies are really happy about the money that they're saving on T&E. So we might be in this world for a minute, right? And then somebody asks a question around, has there been a moment in your careers where transparency didn't work in your favor? Absolutely, right?
Absolutely.
We want to be authentic. We want to be transparent. Sometimes it could backfire. Again, that's where resilience comes in, right? And that's where you stay optimistic about what's happening. There was a young man that was working for me, brother, and I was very transparent with him about what was going on, what we needed him to do differently. I thought by me sharing with him, some of the goals, some of the behind the scenes thing that was going on, he would take that and say, hey, I got to make sure that I rise to the top and stand out, because I'm looking out for my boss who gave me the opportunity. I'm looking out for myself. I'm looking out for the organization. He took that and went left with it. Right. So I could have looked at it and said, all right, based on that, I'm never going to hire another brother again. Wrong. I tried to hire another 5 or 6 or 7 and just make sure that we got online with each other, right? And use that energy to increase that followership. So, yeah, there are times that you can be transparent and it doesn't work out. But again, like Michael said, are you going to see that as an opportunity, or are you going to rest in the negativity? All of those challenges that we deal with as African Americans in corporate America. We're at a mid-level manager symposium. So everybody that signed up for this is trying to get hopefully to the next level of leadership. This is the resilience that we have to build up. This is the network that we have to use in order to help us get through some of those challenges.
Very, very well stated. All right. And so we have one last question. And I'd like all of you to give a little bit of insight on this one. how do we help our people see challenges as opportunities to grow? And a lot of times we see them, as we discussed earlier, as challenges, and we start to cower and back down. But it's like, no, how do we start to make sure that we are encouraging one another to step up and rise to the occasion?
Yeah, so I'll start. And, one of the things that, a mentor actually course corrected for me, and it was fairly late in my career. I mean, it was not that long ago. I was an executive at Microsoft, and I, presented in the boardroom and had interactions with our key executives. But every time I went, I was highly prepared. But I went with this doubt in myself in terms of, did I belong in the room? And it's called imposter syndrome. But and this was, I remember this vividly. This was a Black board member that we had at Microsoft, who was a dear friend to this day. But he set me straight one day. I came out of this presentation, and I would always seek to get feedback. Not just from him, but from others as well, other board members and other people in the room, colleagues. And I went to him very sheepishly this day. I don't know why, but I said, I won't call his name, but I said, I don't feel like I did my best job in there today. And I'm in this room with all of these Ivy League executives. I have a very humble background and beginning, and Anthony and Erica know my story, but I was feeling like down. He literally just almost grabbed me by the collar like my father would and said, "Michael, you did an outstanding job. You outshined 90% of the people in the room, including the executives and our board. And you need to understand that you prepared for this incessantly, and you demonstrated that you had command of the content that you were providing, and you need to never walk into this room again and doubt yourself if you take those same steps around preparation." And it really was a wake-up call for me. And I think that for all of us as people of color, we have to make sure that we have the confidence and the determination, the resilience, to make sure that we show up. We all know that we have to show up and be better than our colleagues. But if you've done the work, if you prepare incessantly, and you make sure, you're not going to know the answer to every question, but you know that you have command of your scope of responsibility in the business, then be proud, be confident, and step up to the table. And from that day on, honestly, it's been more than a decade. I very rarely question myself or my capabilities, and make sure that and it's important for me to also, I'm an ELC member, but it's important for me to make sure that the young people coming behind us have that level of confidence. Anthony does not have that problem. I love that brother, and he definitely shows up and makes sure that he demonstrates. And as he said before, he lives, he lives what he exposes in terms of commitment. Excuse me. So I would say that's it. You got to believe in yourself. You guys are investing in yourselves with the mid-level management symposium, and you have to make sure that you carry that confidence and investment on into the future. So I applaud you guys for the commitment that you've made to developing yourselves and your colleagues.
I agree. You belong. And if there's no room for you at the table, tell somebody to scoot over and pull up a chair.
It's the journey of truth. If there's no room for you at the table, get your own chair.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And Erica, we'll take it over to you.
Yeah, I'll share a quick story. So I remember my first mid-level manager symposium, and it was right after I'd had my first child. And when I went out on leave, I was promised if I give up my role that I had, I'd come back to this HR manager role at the time. And then I came back from leave, not to that role, and they put me in something completely different. And I was miserable and struggling and all kinds of depressed and angry with the world. As I look back on the role that I came back into, I grew so much in that role. And it really was a stepping stone for me for the access to leadership that I got, the access to some of just the learning and experience. And so that's something that sort of cemented in my brain of when I face something that's unexpected and not what I signed up for, I had that past experience to know that still good things can come from it. That's my story, and that resonates with me. What I find is that normally your own story and your own past experiences are the things that are going to give you that comfort. So when I'm working with someone that's dealing with a challenge, first of all, my team is coaches. That's what we do. That's the heart of what we do. So digging into them and helping them to make those connections with their own past experiences of when have you faced a challenge and it was something that actually led to your growth, and helping them to then reframe this current challenge in the light of that old challenge, and how can that then create this as a new opportunity for them to grow and leverage that as well.
I love it. I think too many times we forget about how we grew through a certain situation, and it's not until we go back in retro and we're like, oh yeah, that's right, all of this led to. So the steps are already ordained. Keep walking. And Anthony, we will take it to you to start closing us out.
Yeah, because we got to close out, get folks back to the rest of the symposium. So what I love about Michael's story is that brother uplifted him, right? The one who challenged him on the board, he uplifted him. And I know it's a Bible verse. I say it all the time, iron sharpens iron, right? So iron sharpens iron. That's how you deal with challenges. Find somebody in your network, outside of your company, wherever it is. I got a buddy of mine, he's an executive with Aetna today. And I'll call him and I might sound like I'm whining about something. And he pulls me right up and he said, hey man, you got to deal with that head on. You're built for this. It's in our DNA, right? We were made to deal with these challenges. Look at what we've come through. Look at what we come through. Everybody that's here in the symposium, go back, think about your history. Think about what our people have been through. So we're going to embrace challenges a whole different way. Doesn't mean that we don't pause and get our mental health right? Because it is impacting us. So we breathe, we put our mask on first, but after that, we straighten ourselves up. We put our shoulders back, head held high, and we embrace the challenge head on, because we're here to make each other sharper. Thanks,
Mic drop. Boom.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much. Again, Michael Robinson, Anthony Wilson, Erica Hudson, I thank you all. My name is Hazel Barker on behalf of VMware. We hope that you enjoyed the rest of your MLMS. Have a great time. Continue getting this knowledge and continue uplifting, energizing, and inspiring.